Hi friends, welcome to yet another video on TutorialsPoint with me, Richa. And today in this aviation module segment, we are going to talk about special attention passengers and the briefings given to such passengers. Well, it is a very interesting module because here the cabin crew has to have a lot of protocols with regards to such passengers, and in our module today, we'll discuss about what are these protocols. Well, on the agenda today is understanding who are special passengers and the different categories of these special passengers, unaccompanied minor travel and what are the nitty-gritties involved in unaccompanied minor, wheelchair passengers, blind, deaf or as well as dumb passengers, medical case passengers, and that is what we're going to cover in our module today. So, well friends, if I had to ask you who exactly are these special attention passengers? We all have passengers generally who come into the aircraft who are very fit and fine, and they do not really require any special help or any special attention given to them. These are passengers who are ABPs, meaning they are able-bodied passengers. Well, on the other side, there are those passengers who have difficulty in walking and hence they require wheelchair. They are not people who are very fast in running in case there is an emergency, so they require help in that. There could be small children, there could be sick passengers, there could be passengers who require medical attention. Well friends, these are people who are termed under the category of special needs passenger, and it is the crew's responsibility to help these passengers in the utmost caring manner. Well, understanding the different categories, passengers with reduced mobility are categorized into various groups which are distinguished by the disability of the passenger who requires that particular attendance or that particular assistance. These are identified in the airline by a code which is known as IRIMP code. These codes are given to these special passengers because everybody in aviation will understand these particular codes, be it an engineer, be it a ground staff, or even the pilot, co-pilot as well as the flight attendants know these people by such codes. Let's discuss about what these codes are for special attention passengers. Well, BLND stands for blind passenger, who is blind actually. DEAF is very commonly understood as deaf passengers who cannot hear anything. UNM is unaccompanied minor. Any child who is below the age of 16 years is known as unaccompanied minor, and it could be children who are traveling absolutely without parents or guardians are undertaken by the help of the crew member. So a crew needs to take care of unaccompanied minors who are small children. WCHR is wheelchair ramp. Wheelchair ramp means those people who come on the wheelchair till the ramp, meaning not inside the cabin but only till the ramp or the steps of the aircraft. WCHS is wheelchair service, meaning they actually come inside the cabin area also, and that is why they are known as wheelchair service. WCHC is wheelchair inside the cabin area. So these are people who use a wheelchair right at the time of boarding, and they come inside the cabin and they have to be assisted till the seat which is assigned to them. MEDA is medical passengers, those people who require medical assistance, so that is MEDA. OXYG is passengers who require oxygen. Now, there might be certain passengers who are not well or who require some kind of medical assistance with regards to needing oxygen on board, and because of that, there has to be oxygen available to them on board. A pilot needs to know about oxygen passengers. STCR is a stretcher passenger, meaning those passengers who have been declared by a particular MBBS doctor that they need to be carried inside the aircraft only on a stretcher. Those are STCR passenger, that is stretcher passenger. Well friends, all of these codes are used by airline industry and terminology is used, and it is very essential that the pilot and the co-pilot knows when these are the people who are traveling inside the cabin. There are certain general protocols to be followed with regards to boarding and disembarking. Let's look at what these procedures are. People who have reduced mobility, who self-identify as needing assistance, additional time needs to be given to them. So a person who is sick or on a wheelchair needs to be having pre-boarded, meaning they need to come before all the other passengers, so that for the simple reason that these people need a lot of time, and if there are other passengers waiting for them, they will take a lot of time to go to their seat. So pre-boarding, that is, they come before each and every passenger comes on board, and they are disembarking last, meaning once all the passengers after landing come out of the aircraft, wheelchair passenger or people with reduced mobility are disembarked the last, because they take a lot of time to get out of the aircraft as well. Well, let's understand certain general protocols with regards to maximum number and escort requirement. Now, it is very essential that the maximum number that you can take of the special need passenger needs to be definitely lesser, because the number of passengers with reduced mobility should not exceed the number of able-bodied passengers or people capable of assisting in case there's an emergency requirement. So friends, if at all, God forbid, there's an emergency, you need people who are not so much of needing assistance, but able-bodied passengers who can take care of themselves, as well as these people with reduced mobility. With regards to escort requirement, passengers with reduced mobility who are not able to reach an emergency exit without assistance in a reasonable time should be escorted. So whoever is the escort for this particular passenger who's traveling with a reduced mobility, like a wheelchair or a stick, etc., they need to have an escort traveling with them, and this particular escort needs to be at least 16 years old or even older than that, as well as physically and mentally able, willing to evacuate the passenger with reduced mobility in case of an emergency. Well, cabin crew is always there to help out the special need passenger, but it is always advisable if these people with reduced mobility have an escort who can actually help them whenever there is an emergency on board the aircraft. Let's look at certain general protocols to be followed during an evacuation procedure. During an emergency evacuation, the cabin crew is responsible for evacuating the passengers with reduced mobility that are not able to reach an emergency exit without assistance in a reasonable manner. Passengers with reduced mobility requiring assistance to reach an emergency exit should be evacuated by the escorts. Depending on the situation, the cabin crew may assist them. Well friends, it's important to understand that these escorts who are traveling along with people with reduced mobility need to be with them, seated along with them. However, in case of an emergency situation, these escorts are supposed to help the person with reduced mobility during the evacuation. In case they are not able to, the cabin crew is definitely going to be there around to help them. Well, there has to be certain protocols for seating arrangements for these people who have requirement of special needs passengers. So a person who is a reduced mobility passenger needs to be seated on a seat with a movable armrest for a passenger who cannot easily transfer over a fixed aisle. While it is very important that people who are sitting in certain seats need to have an armrest which is movable, so that people with reduced mobility can easily fit into those seats without having too much of tension onto them. A seat that provides additional leg room for a passenger who cannot bend his or her leg, although not an emergency exit. Ideally, the first row of the cabin is a place which has extra leg room for the passenger. Ideally, in an ideal situation, a person with reduced mobility, for example a wheelchair passenger, should be seated on the first row of the aircraft, or if not available, on the second or the third row, but on the aisle seat always, not in the window or middle seat. Then again, one more important thing needs to be followed is, on the overwing exit, you should never ever let a passenger with reduced mobility or wheelchair sit onto the particular overwing exit, because during an emergency they will never be able to open the door and help the other people in evacuation. A seat close to lavatory or exit for a passenger with a mobility impairment. A person who is not able to walk at all should be seated next to a lavatory because of the fact that when they want to use the lavatory, you will not expect them to walk a lot of distance. Certain briefings need to be made for these people who have reduced mobility or wheelchair passenger or even UNM. Now, these individual safety briefings are to be given by the cabin crew before the flight takes off for that particular destination. These people needs to be gone through these briefings in detail, and should they have any assistance or require any kind of help, they can always press the call bell and call the flight attendant for their queries. Now, certain protocols to be followed with regards to carriage of wheelchair. A wheelchair is a very heavy instrument, and it needs to definitely be foldable, and make sure that if you cannot put it inside the cabin, it has to generally go into the cargo area of the particular aircraft. Nowadays, most of the airlines do not allow wheelchair to be carried inside the cabin. So henceforth, now the protocol or the rule of the airlines is such that wheelchair needs to be in a foldable condition and it needs to go into the forward cargo of that particular airline. So that's the protocol with regards to carriage of wheelchair. You cannot carry it inside the cabin. It has to always go in the cargo area. Protocols to be followed for a lavatory. Well, accessing lavatory is of course very important for special needs passenger. However, when the seat belt sign comes off, or rather comes on, that is the time then people will not be allowed to use the lavatory, and the lavatory needs to be locked or occupied by the cabin crew. Whenever a special need passenger needs to use the lavatory, they need to press the call bell and the cabin crew will come and help them, remove them from their seat and take them to the nearest lavatory. Now friends, it's very important to understand that people who have special needs need to be seated very, very close to the lavatory so that it is convenient for them when they want to use the washroom. Let's understand certain protocols with regards to blind passengers. Well friends, blindness can be of two categories. One is complete blindness and the other one is partial blindness. Let's look a protocol with regards to blind passengers. With regards to blind passengers, the cabin crew first needs to assess the situation, understand what kind of blindness the person is having. They need to make sure that they treat the symptoms, utilize first aid equipment as installed. So if in case a blind passenger needs any help with regards to first aid, they need to make sure that they give them first aid. Other crew members to provide backup equipment. Ensure that the flight crew or the captain of the flight, the pilot, is knowing about the fact that there is a blind passenger on board. Request medical assistance from passengers in case there is a need for help. Complete any necessary paperwork. For carrying blind people, it's very important that paperwork needs to be completed by the cabin crew and it has to be in a complete form. If required, request medical assistance after landing. So in case there's a medical help which a blind passenger needs, post landing the pilot needs to be informed that while immediately after landing they will require medical help or medical assistance. Well friends, that brings us to a conclusion of this particular module on the aviation segment of special need passengers and their briefings. Well, we do hope you have enjoyed listening to this particular segment because we've discussed a lot of passengers who need special assistance, be it blind passengers, deaf passengers, or even children who are unaccompanied minors, stretcher passengers, oxygen needing passengers, etc. So well, keep listening to more videos coming and thank you so much for watching us.